Can you hear me? Great. Thank you so much for coming, and welcome to our Zoom track. It's 20 minutes more than an hour dedicated to our EU-funded project called ZOOOM, which the full name is the 3Os and IP Awareness Raising for Collaborative Ecosystems. It's a project dedicated to the use of open source software, open hardware, and open data in the context of contemporary business and technological innovation, with an eye to legal aspects as well. The first talk will be introductory on the project and will be carried on by this Stefano Menegazzi, who is the coordinator of the project, Andy Perucon and Amalia De Gotzen, who work at the University of Aalborg, and Alessandro Rossi, who is an associate professor at the University of Trento. Thank you. The stage is to you.
So, I don't know, okay. Thank you very much, Davide. Okay, let's say something about Zoom. Okay. We are hosted by SFSCon to present you a track of the project. During the first day, so today, we will have 3 presentations. One is about the ZOOM framework with the legal aspect of free and open source software and beyond. That will be presented by Niharika Singhal. We will have the business aspect of FOSS and beyond with Seckin Celik and Davide Serpico. And finally, an ecosystem perspective always by Davide Serpico and Seckin Celik from University of Trento. The second day we will have instead an interactive workshop to which we invite you to participate if you will be here. But let's go directly on the topics of the project. So, which is the scope of ZOOM project? The project aims to increase the knowledge and the capabilities among software, hardware, and data creators and end users. The idea is really increase the competence in using and in a correct way the open licensing, so knowing the rights and duties that these kind of licenses carry along, is to also increase the competence in choosing the kind of license. Okay, afterwards your IP is created, so your intellectual property is generated. It will be necessary, okay, to reach some insight to how to do that. And finally, also understand which kind of possible business model can be exploited with open licensing strategy for hardware, software, and data. Final topic of the project is also analyzing the ecosystem, so having an idea on how new technology, for example, could benefit in the adoption and use of this kind of open licenses. Right now in the project we reached really a broad number of deliverables, documents, okay, that is a knowledge base that regards and joins together business and legal aspect for software, hardware, and data that will be released as public documents, so open to everybody in Creative Commons license. We also reached a more or less new concept of business and legal framework based on the results from the previous activities. We worked in a deep dive webinar. Okay, we participated in the deep dive webinar from OSI and contributed with the insight from the project on what is an open source AI and what does it mean. We are working right now on a toolkit. It's written for humans, so really a useful and usable toolkit that can be really exploited by all the knowledge generators, that could be researchers, developers, companies, and so on, to really be able to work with open licensing and also to be compliant. Finally, we are also preparing and developing some training modules in order to really facilitate the access to these informations. So I'll give the floor to Amalia.
Thank you, Stefano. Just a few words about the toolkit. So one of the outcomes of this project will be this toolkit, as Stefano already mentioned. And it's a toolkit that is supposed to support knowledge creators, but also supporting organizations in better understand this integration between IP management and the business aspects. So we aim at facilitate licensing choices and the business identification. It came out, of course, of some field research and user research, and it is implementing the framework that has been developed within this project. It has 4 main sections, and you can see them here. So open license strategy is one section. Then we will talk about cases of open license innovations, training materials, and network and events. The toolkit is also collecting a series of tools that are already out there available and integrates with new tools what it is out there. It is now under development, which means that it has been designed, it is in the process of being implemented, but we are gathering now feedback from potential users, so and you might be some of them. And tomorrow will be one of the activities we will carry out to better understand if what we design basically works. And so we will present our toolkit tomorrow morning from 9:20 to 10:20, as you can see here. And you will be doing something with us. So we will propose you some tools to work on with us, and we are really looking forward to have your feedback on it. So I hope you will all participate. You can find some more information on the Zoom webpage, and now I hope you will enjoy the next talks, which are also about the project. Yes? And that would be it.
Okay, so I guess it's a bit early to ask questions since we just presented what we're going to do in the next hour. But if you have any question, is the right moment. But we can maybe I can tell you what exactly we are going to do in the next hour, perhaps in the next 2 minutes. The next talk will be by Niharika Singhal and will be about the legal aspects of the project. So we are basically developing a theoretical framework that will guide the toolkit, and this framework has a legal and a business aspect. So the first talk by Niharika, who is a project manager at the Free Software Foundation Europe, will drive us to across the legal issues relating to the use and development of open source software, open hardware, and data. Then I will be giving a talk with Sechkin about the business aspects, and then one about the, let's say, what we talk ecosystemic perspective, basically the complexities of the interactions between different actors developing and using open source technologies for innovation and business. This is basically the plan. Thanks. So now we wait for the bell. Okay, thank you for being here. Our next speaker for the Zoom track will be Niharika Singhal, who is project manager at the Free Software Foundation Europe and is involved in many legal and awareness-raising activities. She will be presenting the legal aspects of our project. Thank you, Niharika.
Buonasera, and good evening to everybody present here today. My name is Niharika Singhal, and I'm working as a project manager at Free Software Foundation Europe. It's my third year here at SFSCon, and it always leaves me with new connections and new experiences, newer insights into the world of free software. So I'm really excited and happy to be here once again. Today I'm presenting as in the capacity of a consortium member of the ZOOM project, which is funded by the European Commission, and it focuses on integrating the 3 O's, open data, open hardware, and open software into an innovative or innovation-oriented policy. Under the ZOOM framework, there is a strong focus on the legal aspects of the 3 O's, and with different consortium members, the idea is to bring in our own respective expertise, and there's no surprise here, representing FSFE. We're engaged in contributing to the legal aspects of free software. So I'm going to first set the agenda for today. I'm going to give a brief introduction to what is free software licensing, followed by the best practices in FOSS license compliance program. And then I will talk about how copyright and license information can be streamlined with the help of an automated tool called Reuse, developed by the Free Software Foundation Europe. So the primary question to ask today is how to make FOSS licenses easier to comply with. So as you see, free software provides us with 4 freedoms: freedom to use, study, share, and improve. The 4 freedoms are enjoyed or given by a software license, which means that free software can be used and shared by anyone in a non-exclusive manner by way of a license, which then serves the public good. The correct appropriation of free software licenses requires it to conform to the community's norms, standards, and expectations. So coming to the fundamentals of free software licensing compliance, at the outset, proprietary licenses are fundamentally incompatible to each other, but well-known free software licenses are not only well-documented, they're streamlined, they allow us to avoid license proliferation, and increase legal interoperability and simplify license adoption. And they've withstood complex legal issues, and which is why they make licensing far more easier. Having said that, free software licenses do impose conditions on the exercise of the license, but these are not limited as to the type of use, which we've seen commonly in licenses such as in the past we've had this hypocritic license, or even in the future, even at present, with the emergence of AI, we see there's been a lot of license proliferation of licensing models that basically add additional behavior restrictions and still claim to call themselves as free and open. This actually posits a grave and serious problem. But moving on, free software licenses do not impose any conditions as to the location of the use, number of copies, etc., in comparison to proprietary schemes and softwares. So now let's see what are the objectives and intentions of the adopters behind using FOSS licenses. So if the intention is to make the contribution free, the preference is given to reciprocal or copyleft licenses, as such licenses basically allow to do almost anything except for distributing closed source versions. under the only condition being that it has to be under the same licensing terms. So for example, this would include GPL, LGPL, AGPL, etc. If the intention is to keep the license obligation to the simplest terms, then releasing the code under a non-reciprocal license or a permissive license will allow a quick and effortless adoption by the users. Such licenses are usually short and simple, and they allow the use of the work under almost, with almost every condition, such as even making and distributing closed source versions. Examples include BSD, MIT, Apache. And if the intention is to contribute to software, which is basically centered around a community, then the choice of license basically depends on the preference given by the community. And this is essentially so that the distribution of the software fits for the further distribution, for the further usage of that group. So now, once we know how to choose an appropriate license, the next step is to apply it to the software. And let's look at some of the important compliance steps in this regard. First and foremost is the identification of all copyright holders. Why this is important is because first we need to be mindful of the fact that the legislative interpretation of copyright holders can vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So this is something that we need to be extremely mindful of. So for example, a lot of times the term copyright holder and author are used interchangeably. However, there could also be situations where the author is being paid by their employer, and so in such a situation, the copyright holder is actually the employer. So one needs to be really mindful of the fact that the jurisdiction, the interpretation of copyright holder could vary. We should also be wary of the situations where a copyright holder goes MIA, missing in action, or has unfortunately died. Then, as a rule of thumb, always check the copyright and license information in the root directory or README files of the project. The reuse tool is actually extremely beneficial in this regard, but that's something that I will come down to later in my slides. Then, if there's no license information, that does not mean that the work is in public domain. It's very important to understand that because it actually inhibits the user, the adopter, from using any work. And a prudent move in this case would be to reach out to the copyright holder and ask them to license appropriately. Then license-based review. So the free software policy generally requires the software to be reviewed on the basis of the license that it's covered with. But a lot of times, companies have different positions on this. Sometimes they want to opt for a package-by-package review, but all of that really depends on whether or not they have heightened security concerns and other ancillary situations. So all in all, in essence, there is no one-size-fits-all policy when it comes to reviewing software, but it all depends on the needs and the requirements of the company. Now let's look at some of the common compliance issues faced by companies and what could be the potential types of solutions. So as you see on the screen, there are certain problems encountered by companies, such as they want to integrate FOSS elements into proprietary software or link proprietary software to FOSS. The basic solution starts with having a robust compliance checklist. But having a robust compliance checklist is met with a lot of logistical, administrative, and operational challenges. And in order to counter those problems, we need to first start with a simple, clear, and concise compliance policy. These should include topics like contribution, code release, and transactional terms. But these policies basically contain only processes and checks. However, the business needs to actually implement these. So first of all, we must identify the free software components of the project. That means mapping libraries, dependencies, and performing periodical code scans to identify if we have any potential licensing incompatibility, or even to identify any proprietary elements. Then we need to create a checklist for license obligations and license and copyright notices. We should also deploy license handbooks and compatibility metrics to determine which licenses are acceptable. Then, as you see, we should also develop workflows for developer requests for incorporating free software into their deliverables. One thing that is super important is conducting training. A lot of times, the free software compliance is handled by professionals who have a sound legal or engineering background. And in order to have a better intra-team communication, it's super important that trainings are imparted regularly. Then establishing a contribution policy for external contributors, for external contributions is also extremely important. An external contribution policy is basically a set of rules that govern how third-party force can be managed in your project. So, which is why it's extremely important to also establish that. And then coming to reuse, using an automated tool for simplifying workflows such as reuse could also ease off a major chunk of the compliance burden that a company might have. Having said that, let's look at what reuse is all about. The project was founded by FSFE in 2017 to basically raise awareness of the best practices for expressing license and copyright information in free software projects. We often see in projects that there are several different file types that have competing and unstandardized methods to store metadata and this copyright and licensing information. What reuse essentially does is that it declares the best practices for, to basically have all your copyright and licensing information in one place in a very unambiguous and human and machine readable format, so that when you want to use that in some other project, it is basically copied and can also be easily reused by third parties. So it essentially facilitates management of source codes by automatedly standardizing licensing and copyright information. Reuse is also a community-based project which supplements several related projects such as Clearly Defined, OpenChain, Fossology, etc. And it's been widely adopted. We have over 1,400 projects that are now reuse compliant. And reuse specifications are also central in the compliance workflow for the European Commission's Next Generation Internet Initiative. My colleague Gabriel had previously given a talk defining what this NGI is all about. So I hope you had the chance to actually listen more into what the NGI is. And yeah, with that, I think I would like to wrap up my presentation for today. I hope it was insightful for you. If you have any questions, I'm all ears. Otherwise, you can also reach out to me by email, or till the time I'm here at the venue, we could have a conversation on how to use FOSS to make licensing better in your organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We have 1 minute for one question, if you have any consideration or feedback. Apparently, you're being very clear enough. Okay, thanks.
Just a quick one. In one of the slides, you were mentioning scan the code. Okay. Scanning the code means that I am looking to the code, searching something, and checking or verifying the code in some about with some patterns in mind. Do you have an idea of the pattern? So, what should I have? What I have to search in the code to scan it and to check it? This is very general.
Time's up. I'd love to take this question with you offline, and also like to discuss reuse, because that's where majority of these checks happen. So let's discuss about this.
Thank you very much. See you soon.
again, everybody. Welcome to the Zoom track here at SFSCon. Let me introduce two researchers from University of Trento. The first one is Selik Sechkin, a PhD student at the University of Trento in economics and management. He's working on OSS, so open source software, open hardware, and innovation. And the colleague Davide Serpico, a PhD postdoctoral researcher in UniTN, working always in the same area on business management, and is a philosopher of science. And they will carry you through the topic of the business aspect of FOSS and beyond.
Thanks. So you can stay here. I will speak through this. So, thank you for staying with us. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to present the business aspects of our project. So basically the finding relating to how a business should, what kind of decisions and issues a business or a company can meet throughout their journey in the use or development of open source technologies. So I will, after a very brief introduction, I will explain basically how we gather data to build our framework. Most of it was based on literature review, boring stuff, but the funny part was analyzing case studies, so primary data through interviews, for instance, for which we recruited several companies. And I will briefly summarize such data and findings and explain how we started to develop this business and legal framework, which will be the basis for the toolkit that will be presented tomorrow. So basically, we analyzed 59 companies across the literature in business and management studies and technological innovation literature, and only some of them were from the literature, though. Others were those that we interviewed, basically. And so this is the second category, is mostly what I'm going to talk about. All these companies are EU-based, and their activities relate either to open source software, open hardware, or open data, or the combination of these the three O's. Also, we gave special attention to emerging technologies in our project, among which AI and blockchain, to develop this framework and the toolkit. So I'm not going to go through the case studies from the literature, because you can actually read the papers. If you are interested, reach out, and I can give you a database of literature on which we based our framework and research. Today I'm mostly going through findings from the interview cases, which are, I think, 26 companies in Europe. Here is a very sketchy summary. Most of them were small and medium enterprises. Some were large companies, and 8 of them micro or startups. Across many technological areas, the open source software is well represented in our database, but actually hardware and data, we had a hard time identifying emerging realities working in open hardware, for instance. So our interviews explored a variety of topics, among which the role of the three O's in the activities of the companies and their approach to IP management, and the motivations for the adoption or contribution to the three O's. Today I'm going to focus on the challenges, risk, and motivation, indeed. And the role of the role of the companies in the ecosystem is the focus of the next talk. In general, all the companies recognize the three O's as a driving force for innovation and competitive advantages, but also highlighted important social and ethical motivations behind the adoption of open source technologies. And I will start with them. Since I'm a philosopher by education, I'm pretty interested in this topic. So apart from strategic things on which Sechkin will elucidate us, there are a variety of considerations about the social impact of open source software, hardware, and data. Among them, the fact that these technologies, assets, and elements are increased security of products, since there is a community-based review of solutions, So reliability and transparency become social values that are reflected in the practices and choices of companies. Another important thing is democratization of knowledge. One company defines open source as a cultural choice rather than just a strategic thing. And this basically returns on the business side as a sort of branding effect, in the sense that companies that align themselves with these values are better positioned to attract consumers and other partners to work with who prioritize such values. And this relates to the strategic advantages of open source, on which Sechkin will say something. Thanks. Your turn.
Okay. For the next, strategic advantages are starting with the standardization, which lets us to flexibility. Since you are conducting an open source project, you should have a standardized knowledge, and in the operations you should use the standardization to have a customization well suited for the both customers and your employees, contributors. And this accelerates innovation and responsiveness to the market demand. Since you have standardization, you will have some flexibility in it. And since you will have a diverse group of contributors, and this will enhance your code quality, and you will address bugs along the way in more efficient way as opposed to proprietary ones. And there are some indirect value capture mechanisms, since Davide said that it's not a pragmatic choice, it's more cultural choice. There will be not immediate return on investments, and your goals should be set the stage for future services if you choose the open source software. In short, you will not have immediate economic possibilities. For example, you will have publicity for your company or networking effects you can use with the indirect value capture mechanisms. And then next one is financial aspects. Of course, the cost saving comes first, and open source enables companies to tap vast repository ready-to-use solutions. This means that you will have such repositories, diverse repositories. They are not specifically tailored for your open source project, but you will avoid starting from the scratch, since it is resource-intensive part of the starting a project. And you will avoid vendor lock-in, since you will not depend on the single vendor, and you will not depend on single vendor. And there are some challenges and risks, of course, and these are according to literature and our interviews. These are mainly convincing the people, convincing your customers, and convincing your team, your admin in the open source project. For example, in the GitHub admin, you should be clear as a company or as a project manager in the open source. You should be clear about open source, what's happening in the open source, and what is the meaning, what is the definition of the open source. And influence of major players might play a role, because maybe they can disrupt the intricate network of raw material and suppliers and the software vendors that they drive revenue. And the big firms might direct software development in specific directions, so you should follow their lead in some specific industries. And continuing with the security concerns, this is again the definition of the open, free software, the convincing the people of your team and the consumers of yours, and how secure is it, how diverse code base is more secure way of using the contributing in the projects. And the last one is community management. This is actually, for me, it's one of the most important parts, because if you don't control your community, not controlling, If you don't manage your community in a good way, efficient way, this community can disrupt or stop contributing, basically. So this might have a risk in your open source project in the future. And continuing with the business legal framework, Davide will take the floor.
Okay. Sorry. Can you hear me? Okay. No? Okay. Very briefly, very quickly. So basically, we organized all this data from the interviews and the literature into 3 layers: legal, economic, and social aspects, trying to focus on the journey that a company in the contemporary world would engage in their adoption of these technologies or in their contribution. And key questions of this framework you can read here is how to create and capture value, how to manage IP, and how the 3 O's interact with each other. Thanks. And the outcome is basically a complex theory, let's say, which I'm not gonna bother you with, but the idea is to try to account to all these aspects in a comprehensive and interconnected way, trying also to account for the decisions that a company can make or is better to make, depending on some structural attributes such as the size of a company, the type of technology they are involved with in, or what 3 O's they plan to contribute to. And that's it, basically. Thank you so much. Any question? Wait for the mic.
Thank you for your presentation. I wanted to know how you integrated this business framework into the toolkit that you created.
Well,
And
this is, okay.
And also if you can take us through the methodology of how you developed the toolkit, what's behind it. Maybe it's a bit long, but...
So the toolkit is actually work in progress, and I'm not the best person to ask, but I can tell that the toolkit will be composed by many different things, like including training, videos, documents, and licensing, choice tools, many different things. And we are planning to put, the work in progress thing will be presented tomorrow morning, but we are planning to basically trying to understand what different stakeholders need, what kind of journey they are gonna, let's say, engage in, what kind of question they have depending on their starting point. And depending on this answer, this web toolkit will drive the user through an interface where different questions will be addressed through different methods. This is basically the idea. Is that correct? Okay. Thanks. Any other question? Okay. I think we can take a break. Thank you so much. Good evening. Our last talk of the ZOOM framework is going to be given again by me and Seckin Selik. Seckin is a PhD student at the University of Trento in economics and management and works on open source software and open hardware in technological innovation. And I am postdoctoral researcher at the University of Trento as well, working in economics and management and the business aspect of the project. So the last talk will be about our findings about ecosystems and networks of companies and organizations within the 3 O's. And after introducing a few conceptual and definitional aspects, Seckin will present the peculiarities of the 3 O's in this context, so about specific aspects of ecosystems in the 3 O's. We will explain again the interviews data, but this time relating only to the ecosystem aspects, and present a general framework based on this data. So the general consensus in the management literature is that networks of companies can usually achieve more than individual companies can. And this requires a few things, such as cross-inference boundaries in terms of organization and innovation strategies, and also find the right balance between cooperation and competition, which is something that is often considered with a neologism, competition. In general, ecosystems in this context are described through key characteristics such as modularity, coordination, and complementarity. But in our project, we focus more on the business motivations for engaging in ecosystems relating to the 3 O's, again, open source software, hardware, and data. What kind of roles companies can play in these ecosystems, and also what challenges they have to face throughout their journey. An inspiring citation from Ricky Ansley is this one. Basically, she said that she didn't intend to stay in tech when she got into it, but the people are what really kept her there. And in this career, in this specific context, she says, you work with other people and you get to work with your competitors. You have friendly relationship with people who work at companies that are the competitors of your companies. And we found it very fascinating to think about this competition and cooperation stuff. So this was the driving force of our research on this topic. Very briefly, I'd like to make some clarifications regarding what kind of ecosystems we found in the literature and in our companies and case studies. But first, let me say that the concept of community doesn't correspond to that of ecosystem, in the sense that if communities are or loosely organized communities or formally structured communities of contributors, basically different ecosystems can be connected to communities, but they don't. The two things don't overlap, basically, conceptually speaking. So very quickly, first type of ecosystem is the business one, where basically there is a focal firm that adapts its network and connection in order to help other companies to get their value proposition and also enhance their value capture mechanisms. Examples are well-known: Apple, Samsung, Nokia. A knowledge ecosystem instead is more often found in the open source world, and the focus is basically exploration rather than exploitation. That is the creation of new knowledge and knowledge sharing. Then we have innovation ecosystem as a third type. Basically, the focus is promoting interaction among different type of players, and the Silicon Valley is a financial network of this sort, where companies, research institutes, and technology developers interact with each other. And then we have the platform ecosystem, which basically represent, like the case of Nintendo, a stable a fundamental element where other components and complementarities are built around by different actors. Thank you.
And one of the most important parts of the ecosystems are the communities, and I will briefly give you the differences of the communities in the open hardware, open software, and open data. And starting with the difference between open hardware, you all know the open software communities, but in the product types, the hardware differs in the physical objects, not exactly composing with the electronics, but also mostly electronic components and robotics are used. In the testing part, you know, compiling the code is most important thing in the open source software, but in the open source hardware, in the designing part, you should compile the code, but the difference is the whole project prototyping, you know, the robotics and the tangible products. The prototyping is differs both in the execution and the licensing. And the community size is often large in the open source communities, but it should be smaller and specialized in the open hardware part, because since they are dealing with tangible products, they should be specialized in their subject. And coming with the data part and the product type, of course, in the data you should have data sets as opposed to codes and tools and libraries. And the development tools differs in the data analysis tools that can be created by open source software also, but the main thing is in the data analysis tools in the open data, and the version control is important. And the issue tracking is, you know, GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, and bug tracking happening in there with the community, within the community. But open source data systems need tracking systems and data quality monitoring and additional softwares in their communities. So continuing with the interviews data, Davide.
Thanks, Sachkin. My turn again, thanks. Okay, so based on what we found in the literature, we put some questions in our interviews with our 25 companies in the EU area. And we asked several questions, among which what kind of ecosystems the company is involved, what is the role of the organization in that ecosystem, and what are the benefits and challenges, self-perceived benefits and challenges. Although all companies recognize the advantages of being in one or more ecosystems in the use or development of the 3Os, we identified also some challenges relating to the competition, but I must say it's mostly about the benefits. And again, our case studies are these 25 companies across of different size, across different technological areas, most of them dealing with open source software or open data, and only a few cases open hardware. Of interest is that we identified about 5 types of roles, distinctive roles, that a company in the current landscape can play in their open innovation ecosystem. The first line, systemic roles, basically include several subtypes, among which system integrator, platform developers, or enablers. And also community roles can involve contributors, simple, complete contributors in a given community to open software, for example, or community managers and leaders. So very quickly about the systemic roles. These companies basically enhance the interaction between actors. And these actors could be other companies, or the PAs, or the universities, or all of them. For instance, there are cases of companies developing platforms for improving open data formats, also leading to indirect value capture mechanism, since this will allow better performing in the use of, for instance, geographical data. Other companies, for instance, some in open hardware world or additive manufacturing, are enabler of a network of organizations. Then other roles that we identified in our data set are focal firms, only a couple of them actually, since our case studies are more startups or small medium enterprises, but a couple of them define the common value proposition of the network. Then we have some innovators, so basically companies that stand in the middle of universities and cross-disciplinary interactions in a context where innovation is the key for business. And then we have some co-creation networks, so companies that basically interact with each other to create together something. And in this case, the interaction is regulated informally. There are no strict legal arrangement between the companies, but only informal agreement on a shared values or aims. And then we have a couple of community roles. Contributors, as I mentioned, simply contribute to open software libraries and plugins, while community leaders and managers instead establish a community around their platform or product and facilitate interaction and access of other companies into their open source software ecosystem. So all our data led us to develop comprehensive framework, which again is too long to explain for this context. But eventually you are free to, you will be more than welcome to visit our website to see the work in progress deliverables, the communication, the papers, all the stuff that are going on, among which a deliverable dedicated to this ecosystemic perspective. Also trying to go into the details of this scheme, this sketch of how companies, PAs, funding agencies, and communities of developers interact in this complex world. Thank you. We have a couple of minutes. If you have a couple of questions, it would be great. I remind you that tomorrow morning there will be a workshop dedicated to the toolkit led by the partners of the Aalborg University in Copenhagen. So you will see this, all these applied to practice, let's say. So, thanks. Okay, thank you so much, and have a nice evening.